Nobody deceives like an addict.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. It's day 80 and there are still mind games going on in East Tennessee. What are the TBI waiting for? Do you remember very early in the Summerwells case this idea of dry drowning? It came up quite early on. We haven't heard much about it recently, but I'm going to touch on it now on day 80 and handcuff it to Don's latest blooper, an approximately 30-minute expletive-laden tirade between Don and Mary. And that was played recently on the interview room. If this is a little confusing at first, don't worry. It's intended to reorient you wherever you are between the Tennessee trees, to bring you back to an aerial view, a clear satellite view of the woods we're dealing with. Worth playing for? Now, before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon on the bottom right of your screen. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So we're going to start off with dry drowning as a metaphor. Now, what I want to do is challenge you to think differently simply by shifting your perspective on this particular case. So when we go back to the dry drowning concept, that's really what it is. It's a shift in perspective. What does this case really look like 80 days into a little 5-year-old girl's disappearance? Now you might be saying, so where is Summer and what does this video have to do about Summer? You know, how are we looking for her through this video? Well, actually we are. And a lot of people seem to be disconnecting the two topics. When you talk about what has likely happened to Summer in her backstory and where Summer is now, they are actually linked, right? So if you take this idea of dry drowning as a metaphor, what I'm going to try and do is help you to hold the hands of these two apparently different thought processes, okay? So think of it like this. Dry drowning is a strange medical anomaly. It's actually fairly rare, that occurs when a child, and yes, it is usually a child, appears to be fine after swimming. So you see a child, the child outwardly seems to be okay, but then something happens to them a short time later. And then there's kind of a mystery regarding that, right? And so because this mechanism is unseen, invisible, delayed, it may be hard to link the one event to the other, and yet they are linked, even if you can't see it. Even if there is this delay and this invisibility, there is a connection between the one event and the other. Does that make sense? It's subtle. Now, although dry drowning may catch some people completely unaware, it does have symptoms surrounding it. But as I say, they're subtle. There may be flaring of the nostrils, indicating an increased rate of breathing. There might be coughing. There might be sleepiness. There might be forgetfulness or strange behavior. There may be a little bit of a lack of coordination, right? There may also be throwing up. In the same way, Summer's disappearance is something that happened after something else happened. And there have been symptoms too in this case. Instead of coughing, clinginess. Instead of forgetfulness, a certain amount of non-verbalness. Instead of nostril flaring, perhaps other biological signs of SA. SA isn't the full story here. It may feel like it at times, but it's not. SA isn't the full story, in the same way that drowning isn't the full story of what happens to a person either. I'm talking about dry drowning. Something happened before that dry drowning, right? The dry drowning metaphor for SA shows how it's not really the dry drowning that's the source of the condition. Something happened besides the dry drowning. Something else happened. Something happened to allow the dry drowning to occur. In the same way, my view is that the possible essay of summer isn't the source of the reason something happened to summer. It's simply a serious aggravating factor, right? Finding summer also means finding out about something else. And isn't that why she's hidden? Isn't that why she's missing? Isn't that why it's so hard to find her? So let me repeat that. Finding summer also means finding out about something else. And so isn't it important not to find summer because it's important not to find out about something else? So in the same way that an infant treated for a submersion injury will cause a physician to inquire about the backstory. So the physician is confronted with this submersion injury, and so he's going to want to know, okay, what happened before this? Tell me about the events of the past day or whatever it is. And in the same way, an investigator will be confronted with the same thing in this story. The irony is, even though Summer hasn't been found, the backstory is emerging anyway. The backstory is coming out regardless. Don's backstory has been coming out more than Candace's, but we're getting a better fix every passing day on how Summer, quote unquote, drowned, long before the events of the swimming hole. This drowning was a process, it was a pattern. It was part of an intergenerational pattern of dysfunction and worse, repeating itself. It all feels novel and new to us, but it's par for the course for life at Chalet and Wells. It all feels strange and unfamiliar to us, but it's something that was all too familiar to Summer. So that brings us back to this question, why is Summer missing? I don't think it's rocket science to be explicit and simple about what we're talking about. So number one, why is Summer missing? 2, to control the narrative. 3, who is trying to control the narrative in this story? 4, which narrative is being controlled? And that's one of the most important parts of it. And I don't think the answer to number 4 is one thing. I don't think the narrative that is being controlled is just, let's say, the essay narrative. It's also the swimming hole narrative. But one of them is being controlled a lot more than the other. So let's go through that again without the numbers. Why is Summer missing? To control the narrative. Who's trying to control the narrative in this story? What's the answer to that? And then which narrative is being controlled by that person? So in yesterday's live stream with the interview room, Chris McDonough played a recording. It was around about 30 minutes long. And one of the things that came out in that recording a couple of times, it was repeated a few times quite emphatically, was Summer loves her expletive daddy. Summer loves her expletive starting with an F, daddy, right? Now, a few times in Don's rant to Mary, played last night on the interview room, Don repeated those words. You may know by now that Mary's call to Don, and bear in mind Don eventually angrily hung up on his stepsister. That call to Mary, from Mary to Don, preceded Candace's prank call to Mary about Don. The point of Mary's call was to let Don know that Genie was pressing charges. In other words, Mary was letting Don know that Genie was about to discredit Don. And so what happened to Mary? And that's not really the appropriate word for this, unless you're Don. If you're Don and you've heard about someone from your past coming back to haunt you at a pretty inconvenient time, well, it means your reputation is going to be harmed. You're going to face disgrace, dishonor, loss of respect, suspicion. But beyond that, one open can of worms may lead to another, and another, and another. And if you want to sort of get a sense of what that feels like, watch the movie Bombshell, right? The one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And there's someone trying to control the narrative, and there's someone else trying to get the narrative out, right? I mean, isn't that why Summer's gone missing? So that someone can keep cans of worms closed and the lambs silent. And lambs have been silent. I think Genie has been keeping a secret for 37 years. What I think's been underestimated is the fact that Genie came forward the day after Summer went missing. Now, that may not seem strange. That may not seem so groundbreaking. It may not seem like a big deal. But if you've been keeping a secret for 37 years, what is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Well, how about a 5-year-old little blonde girl going missing under mysterious circumstances, and once upon a time, you were that 5-year-old. Genie felt what happened to her was relevant to Summer's disappearance. Think of the parallel but distorted mirror of Don and Candace immediately knowing it was an abduction, and Genie instantly feeling it was something else. But I think the part to emphasize there is this whole thing of Don and Candace immediately knowing that it's something, and Genie immediately knowing or thinking or feeling or experiencing it or remembering it or being triggered as something else. It puts into question, it puts into perspective the immediately of Don and Candace. Is that authentic? Was what they felt immediately authentic, true, genuine, creditworthy, reliable, trustworthy, right? Or was what Genie felt more reliable, more realistic, more likely? So if Summer suffered SA, and if that can be shown or proven, then it potentially opens so many cans of worms in Don's past. It shows dry drowning in so many bedrooms, in so many dark places from a dark past. Just think of that concept, dry drowning, the words, and take it out of context, out of the medical definition. Think about a little girl. There's no water in the story, but a little girl dry drowning in her bedroom over so many nights, slowly having the life force taken out of her. Almost like being suffocated, but not the actual breath taken out of her, but the actual life, the actual vitality of a person taken out of them. And that brings us to Don's mind games. And I do think mind games are going on in this case right now, not just from Don's side, but also law enforcement side. There's quite a lot of mind games going on. Grandma actually spoke about Don's mind game, so I'm not projecting onto this. I'm citing something that she said, she experienced. She said that it was something that Don would do to Candace, meaning her daughter. She saw it happening. Now, we've seen some of that here, and Chris McDonough has done a good job of highlighting some of them. Victim blaming, but this is real victim blaming. You often hear about victim blaming in true crime, and I think it's sort of bandied about sometimes a little too kind of recklessly. This is victim blaming. And you can see how constant and unrelenting it is. Victim blaming isn't, well, maybe it is or maybe it isn't. It is pretty obvious. It is constant, it is repeated, it is merciless. It is me at the expense of you. It is I'm good, you bad, right? There's also classic triangulating, minimizing, scapegoating, inverting. I didn't do something, you did. Intimidating, and all the rest. While I was listening to this, I was thinking how pointless it would be to do statement analysis on any of it, because it so obviously is what it is. You don't need to do a statement analysis on someone kind of exposing themselves, right? It's just so obvious. Chris McDonough has also said, if I understand correctly, that both Don and Candace have called him in the past completely wasted. You also don't need to do statement analysis on that. You don't need to figure out what that means. I remember in the early days of this case, long before there was a lot of information out there, I spoke about the redness of Don's face. That was like a first impression. And I said that looked to me like a sign of alcoholism, a sign of regular alcohol use and possibly abuse. And a lot of people scoffed at that. They said, no, he was sunburned, or no, he's got a fair skin. Almost 80 days later, Grandma lets us know Don's drink of choice is whiskey. And there's also all of this evidence coming forward of regular intoxication. That's different, I think, to what Don has said to a reporter. He told someone, I'm not quite sure who it was, he said something like, he doesn't touch a drop of alcohol these days. Well, has he touched a drop of alcohol since Summer disappeared? What do you think? So to address the question in the title, what are the TBI waiting for? Don't they have enough? Aren't the TBI, don't they have enough for them to act right now? Couldn't they swoop in? What are they waiting for? I've seen this question come up quite a few times. I think what's important to bear in mind is I don't think there's just one potential perpetrator here. And that makes the case a lot more complicated, because your investigation, if it was one person, then the entire timeline can basically be devoted to that one person. But when you've got two people, you can basically start splitting the timeline in half. So if it's 80 days that Summer Wells has gone missing, well, 40 days effectively have been spent investigating one person, maybe 40 days another person. If you add another person, then it suddenly is even less. And it could go even beyond that, right? So what is happening is they are being scouts. They are trying to still assemble information, not on one person, not on just one person, but on other people. Besides that, they're also waiting for people to come forward. And we know that because we hear them constantly asking for people to come forward, to call in. Do you know about the red Toyota Tacoma? You may have seen something, let us know. They're waiting for people to come forward. And, people have come forward. Some people have come forward quite recently. And more people have come forward, over time. And so you might say, well, some people have come forward, so what are they still waiting for? People have come forward, okay, let's act. Take some action now. Well, perhaps the idea is that even more people would come forward. Perhaps they are waiting for you know who you are, to come forward. Because I think you must remember it's a double-edged sword. While some are coming forward, actively coming forward, making a decision, taking action, someone else is not coming forward. Each day, someone else is choosing not to come forward, making a decision not to take action, making a choice to allow things to be covered up, right? And maybe the TBI are waiting for someone specific to come forward. Maybe they're waiting for Grandma to come forward. In a strange way, the Facebook messaging that tripped Grandma up was perhaps the push Grandma needed in the right direction. Except Grandma it feels like she's reverted to type, reverted to the old pattern of wait and see, passively riding out the storm and waiting for it to blow over. Well, some storms you can't do that. Some storms blow your house out from right under you, flood your bed, wash away your food and your clothes. This is a storm like that. You better believe it. And the only shelter for a storm like this is in the truth. Trying to shelter in the silence or in the past is like trying to shelter in the eye of the storm. It's not over, honey. It's just getting started. So I'm not going to take it further than that, but I'm going to finish off with a question that is repeated quite often. Certainly a question I've had in my mind, because things are different where I live. But the question is it legal to record private calls and post them on YouTube? Well, the short, simple answer is it is in Tennessee. It is legal in Tennessee and Utah, right? In Tennessee, you can record a conversation with another person without that person's knowledge or consent, because Tennessee is a one-party state in this matter. which basically means if one of the parties agree to releasing the conversation, well, then that's fine. But one's got to be careful because that's not the case everywhere. I will be doing a live this weekend, very likely Saturday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to again be talking about grandma's impact on the timeline. Has what has come about from grandma changed everything? And so you can expect a live stream on that topic on Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be confirming that closer to the time, so look out for that. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are, stay safe this weekend. Look after one another, and I'll see you guys next time.